pretty much everyone has experienced the pain and the broken heart of ending a romantic relationship or a friendship for that matter. But just because it's common does not mean that it doesn't really hurt. I'm Karen Andrews. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my mission is to bring mental health and understanding about mental health into everyone's home. I want to empower you with knowledge that you can make the small changes and the large changes in your life that will be helpful to you. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience of breakup grief, and then I'm going to give you 7 helpful tips for how to cope and how to process the grief in a helpful way so that you can move on. The emotions that you go through when you end a relationship that is important to you are actually a form of grief. Nobody has died, but something has died. You have experienced a loss, and for you, the loss can be traumatic even. When a relationship ends, there is a death of the hopes that you had for that relationship, for what you thought it was, for what you thought that you meant to that person, for what you thought that the relationship was going to be in your life in the future. And letting that go represents the kind of death that is a loss that you have to grieve. Even if you were the person who ended the relationship, you may still go through a period of really painful grief. Commonly, people experience things like anger, sadness, hurt, loss, betrayal, loneliness, feeling heartbroken. Your heart might actually hurt. You might actually feel the ache in your chest when you think about the person, when you think about the loss, when you think about the fact that it's the end of the relationship. You may feel confused. You may feel guilty. You might question yourself and question your identity. These kinds of emotions are all very normal in the face of the grief of a breakup and the broken heart that commonly goes with a breakup. There may even be some relief mixed up. Maybe you knew that the relationship was no good for you. Maybe you knew that it wasn't going in a good direction. So there's relief there, but the relief can be so mixed up with all the other feelings that it's hard to actually distinguish it. Maybe the breakup was a long time coming, and maybe your friends are telling you that you need to move on, that you need to get over it, put it behind you, meet someone else, live your life. But you may well not be ready to do that. And you may in fact be surprised by the intensity of the grief that you experience, even when you planned a breakup. When the breakup was unexpected, or when it wasn't your choice, that brings a whole different level of confusion and questioning of yourself. You may blame yourself. You may battle feelings of rejection, or of betrayal. If you're finding this video helpful in any way, whether you've gone through a breakup, whether you're supporting someone who's going through a breakup, or whether you're planning a breakup, then please click the like button and the subscribe button. It's really helpful and it means a lot to me. Tip number 1 is acknowledge your feelings. If you try to suppress your feelings or deny them, it actually only makes them stronger. The first step towards acceptance is acknowledgement. You can't actually accept something when you haven't even admitted that it's what you're feeling. If you name your feelings, that is helpful in and of itself. So take a moment to pause, to check in, and to define the feelings that are going through you, even if they're very mixed up, and even if they change a lot over the course of a day or the week or whatever it might be. Take a pause, think about what you're feeling, look inside yourself and acknowledge your feelings. Tip number 2 is take care of the basics. This is no time to let your self-care go. This is a time to make sure that you get enough sleep, that you eat good quality regular meals, that you drink enough water, and that you get some sunlight and exercise every day. I know that you might feel too upset to imagine really taking care of yourself, but this is a time when you need to be your own best friend. You need to take care of you. Tip number 3 is use your own coping strategies. Everyone has coping strategies. We've all come through things in our lives where we've had to use coping strategies, or where we've tried different coping strategies and found some that worked and some that didn't. Whatever your coping strategy is, use it. Whether you're the kind of person who likes to throw themselves into exercise, or whether you love to watch series, or whether your main coping strategy is writing in your journal and crying lots of tears, all of those are okay. Do what you need and do whatever works for you. Use your own tried and tested coping strategies. If you have no coping strategies, or you feel like you're in too much pain to come up with any kind of coping strategies, then maybe you need to talk to someone. Even 1 or 2 sessions with a good therapist can really help you to get over the hump and to come up with some good coping strategies that you can use to help yourself through this time. Coping strategies to avoid, however, are drinking your sorrows or eating your sorrows. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go out and have a few drinks if that's what you want to do, or that you're not allowed to open, that big tub of ice cream and eat the whole thing, as long as you don't do that too often. And when you do it in moderation, because both of these things, while they may make you feel good in the very short term, the way that you feel afterwards is really usually not worthwhile. And these kinds of coping strategies can actually make you feel worse in the longer term. Tip number 4 is take some time to reflect. The point of reflecting on your relationship is not to lay blame on anyone. It's not to feel guilty or to demonize the other person. Because when a relationship ends, there is a temptation to make the other person into a villain, and to make the whole relationship and the ending of the relationship a huge problem that was all their fault. That is a very normal response, but it's not altogether helpful. What is helpful is to think clearly about what your part in that relationship and in the ending of the relationship was. It helps you to make sense of the experience, so that you can take the parts that you want to take with you and leave the parts that you want to leave behind. A really good way to reflect is to write in a journal, but you can also reflect out loud to a friend, or of course you can book a session with a therapist. Tip number 5 is say goodbye. And when I say goodbye, I do not mean say goodbye to the person, because if the breakup has already happened, then you have already done that. And the goodbye that you need to say is not to the person themselves, but to the part of yourself that is still enmeshed in that relationship. A good way to say goodbye is to write a letter to the other person, and in the letter, write everything that you want to say. Write everything that you feel, but do not give the letter to the person. Take the letter and burn it, or rip it up into tiny pieces and throw it into the ocean, or whatever feels right for you. Maybe you want to wrap it up and bury it. But saying a formal goodbye, making a small ritual out of it, is really, really helpful for closure within yourself. You're not going to get closure from them. The closure is something that happens within you as you accept and you let go. Tip number 6 is give it time. Grief is not a quick thing. Sometimes it may actually be faster than you expected. Maybe you had been grieving this relationship for a long time before it actually ended. But generally, it takes a while. There is no specific amount of time. It very much depends on you. You will have the feeling that you are ready, that you have processed the experience, that you've made whatever meaning you're going to make out of the experience. But give yourself permission to take the time that you need to process your grief before jumping into another relationship or into massive amounts of distraction. Give yourself a bit of time to process. Tip number 7 is reach out. Connect with other people. This is a time to connect with friends, with family, or with community. If you are not part of your community, maybe now is a good time to consider joining some kind of community group or taking up a hobby where you might meet new people and make more friends. You can also join online groups. There are plenty of support groups out there that can be useful. Connecting with other people is a way of reminding yourself that even with a broken heart, you are still part of something bigger, and you are still able to give love and to receive love. It is also important to have physical contact and connection. So if you have good friends, hug them. If you have family members that you feel comfortable hugging, then hug them. But if there's no one in your life that you feel comfortable enough to physically be close to, then go and get a massage. A massage is a great way of getting that human touch and that human connection in a very safe and structured environment. Grief after a breakup is very similar in many ways to any other kind of grief. It comes in waves, and at the beginning, the waves come really quickly and close apart. But over time, the waves of grief will lessen and become further and further apart. If you find yourself mired in grief, if you find yourself unable to function, and if that inability to function goes on for longer than a couple of weeks, then you should reach out and speak to a licensed psychologist or even have a chat with your GP, because you might need some extra support. I hope that you found this video helpful. And if you did find it helpful, please let me know in the comments. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer about breaking up and about coping with the grief of breaking up, then also please let me know in the comments, and I'll make a video to answer your question.